Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I am Amy Waywell, Director of Membership at the MFA, and I am delighted to welcome you to tonight's lecture, From Baghdad to Boston, the MFA's first Judaica gallery. We so appreciate your ongoing support and your participation in the MFA's virtual member lecture series. As a reminder, this program is coming to you virtually from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Founded in 1870, the MFA stands on a site that has long served as a place of meeting and exchange among different Algonquin nations, including the Massachusetts. As a museum, we acknowledge the long histories of the land we occupy today and seek ways to make Indigenous narratives more prominent in our galleries and programming. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I have a few logistical notes for you. A transcript and closed captions are available during this program. To enable the closed captions, go to the bottom of the Zoom window and click on the button Show Captions. During the presentation, please use Zoom's Q&A function to ask questions and share comments. And please note that this lecture is being recorded, and we anticipate making it available on the MFA's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. And now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speaker. Simona Di Nepi is the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Curator of Judaica at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, where she is responsible for building and displaying the Judaica collection and for Intentional Beauty, Jewish ritual art from the collection, the museum's first Judaica gallery. Originally from Rome, before moving to the United States, Simona studied and worked in London and Tel Aviv for 25 years. She filled curatorial roles in both decorative arts and old masters at the Victoria and Albert Museum, the National Gallery, and the Royal Academy of Arts in London, where she cared for permanent collections and curated exhibitions. In Israel, she worked as curator at ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People, and as lecturer in Italian Renaissance art at Reichman University. Simona, thank you so much for joining us tonight to highlight this important and growing collection.
Thank you very much, Amy, for your kind introduction, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us to join us on a virtual tour of our first Judaica gallery, which has just turned 1 year old, and it's called Intentional Beauty, even though I call this lecture From Baghdad to Boston. And it really celebrates the treasure of the collection of Jewish ritual art at the MFA, and it features largely new acquisitions. And here it is. It's so that you can see the view from when you first enter the gallery. And I hope that those of you who haven't been yet will come to visit us soon. This is a very meaningful project, not just for me, but for the museum as a whole. It is not just the first Judaica gallery at the MFA, but it is one of the very first such spaces in an encyclopedic museum in the world. So we're very proud about that. And we opened just over a year ago for Hanukkah in 2023, very festive night. And I'm showing you this slide also to show what I think is a very prime location, in very close on the second floor of the American wing, in very close proximity to the Shapiro courtyard, to the epicenter of the museum. I want to make clear from the start that what we've been doing all these years before we opened the Judaica Gallery, which is to integrate Jewish objects throughout the museum building according to the region and period of production in many, many different galleries. And you can see here just some examples, art of the Islamic cultures, musical instruments in the American colonial Newport gallery. So we will continue to do that. You'll be able to see and spot Jewish ritual art throughout the building, even now that we've opened a Judaica gallery. It is also important for me to say that it was a joy to work with the Table of Voices, which is a cohort of Jewish and non-Jewish community leaders, artists, educators in the process for the preparation of this gallery. We shared our thinking and we took on their very valuable input. Why intentional beauty? Why this name? Why this title? Because of the very purposeful and functional nature of the beauty of these objects. According to the ancient rabbinic principle of Hiddur Mitzvah, which is usually translated as enhancement or beautification of the commandment, beauty glorifies God, and at the same time, it also deepens our immersion in the ritual by appealing to our senses. And so this very diverse group of objects has in common the idea of Hiddur Mitzvah, of beautification of the commandment. And it is indeed very diverse. You have paintings, textiles, silver, works on paper, furniture, starting from the late 1500s to the 2000s. In terms of geography, from India, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, North Africa, Europe, and the United States. So it's a contained space with really many centuries and regions of the world in the same gallery. So as I worked on the themes, on the development of the themes for the exhibition, 3 titles and 3 themes really started to emerge. In the center, dressing the Torah, it is self-explanatory. It's those objects that were made to be used in the synagogue. On the left, you see a Judaica revolution. These are works to be used in the home. Because we mainly show contemporary objects, that's why we called it Judaica Revolution. And then on the right, dressing the body. This is really about wearable ritual garments. So starting with that dressing the Torah, and here is where I should probably say that many of you will be very familiar with words and terms that I explain, but it is important I explain them because we are particularly proud that our audience is of all religions and of all backgrounds. And so dressing the Torah, what is the Torah? The Torah that comes from the word teaching, basically it's the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. It is the most central and sacred and important text in Judaism that really shapes Jewish life. And as such, it is also the most treasured object. It is dressed and beautified like a monarch, and dressed in beautiful fabrics, usually a velvet mantle, and adorned with the silver finials and a silver crown. To make concrete and explain how these objects actually are used, how they move in action, in the gallery, we have included a video that was filmed in the Great Synagogue of Rome. I hope many of you have been in the Jewish ghetto of Rome. I'm from Rome, I should say. So I was biased. I asked my friends at the museum in Rome to lend me this video. They were very generous. And it really shows how the old, beautiful, important silver from the Rome community is used in the synagogue when it's taken out from the Torah Ark and carried across the synagogue hall. And I want to start this in-depth virtual tour with what is the single most important object in our collection. It is a Torah shield made to be hung with a chain that you can see on the front of the Torah scroll. And it was made in what was then the region of Galicia in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, it is part of Ukraine. at the end of the 18th century, between 1781 and 1782. And as you come in the gallery, you're really greeted immediately by this object. And just to show its importance, it was even featured by the Wall Street Journal when they, in a piece, in an article about the single owner Sassoon sale at Sotheby's in December 2020. So when I first held this object, and it was at Sotheby's in New York, I really felt it's not very big, it's about 7-8 inches high. I really felt like I was holding a precious jewel. Just look at the different materials and techniques that you can spot. There is gilded silver, semi-precious stones, the technique of niello in the tablets of the law, enamel. And so it was a very special and important object, and there are other reasons as well. And it is characterized by this dense decoration on both sides, which in itself is very unusual. Why? It's unusual because normally Torah shields are meant to only be seen from the front. So they're usually not decorated on the back, and certainly not at this level. If we look at the front, the shield really shows the rather traditional iconography of Moses and his brother Aaron, and the tablets of the law with the 10 commandments, and the crown that is very typical of different Judaica objects because it represents the Torah. But what is quite unique and astounding, really, is this design of interlaced plants of gilded silver that end with heads of fantastical animals. And you can see sea monsters, sea creatures, bird-like creatures with beaks, and lizards. Those are very striking. And because of the level of detail that it's difficult to appreciate on the object, you can see, we have created an interactive device that allows you in the gallery to zoom in at incredibly high resolution and to really appreciate the details. Now, the back, which remember is usually not decorated, is filled with the engravings of a superb precision, depicting scenes from the life of Isaac. So if you look at the top, you see the well-known episode that many remember of the sacrifice of Isaac, Abraham about to sacrificing Isaac, and then stopped by the angel. In the center, it's a continuation of Isaac's life. He's now old and blind, and he's blessing his son, thinking that it is his firstborn, Esav. It's not Esav, who is obliviously hunting in the woods, and it's instead his secondborn, Jacob, Rebecca's favorite, his wife. And so as Rebecca gently pushes Jacob to get this last blessing, and there are details that are really delightful, including the fact that Jacob here is seen wearing animal fur to pretend is his hairier brother Esav. And another reason why this piece is so important, there are many, but this is one of the most fundamental ones, is the fact that it is engraved with the signature and date by the artist, right, in Hebrew. And it says in the year 5542, the Hebrew calendar. In the Gregorian calendar, it's 1781/82. This is the work of my hands, Elimelech Tzoref, from Stanislav. If you look on Google Maps, Stanislav is about 2 hours drive from what is now Lviv in Ukraine, in the region of Galicia then. And so why is this signature so important? We know that silver typically was punched with the maker's mark. There were initials. Here, the artist wants to actually sign his name as if he were Monet or Titian. And also, he wants us to know that he's Jewish because he does that in Hebrew. And why is that important? Because a recurring theme of the gallery is that in Europe, throughout these centuries, up to the emancipation, Jews were excluded from the artistic guilds that included silversmiths. They were not allowed to practice this profession, aside from certain pockets of Europe in certain brief periods. And this area, which is now Eastern Poland and Western Ukraine, was at the time one of those exceptions. The prestige of this acquisition also stems from the fact that for over 130 years, the Torah shield was in the collection of the Sassoon family. The Sassoon were a famed, celebrated Jewish family originally from Iraq, from Baghdad, who they moved to India in the 19th century. They built a global empire in Asia and in Europe. And you see here Reuben Sassoon. He was the Judaica collector, one of the pioneering Judaica collectors. And he started, he really started to collect Judaica when he moved to London. And indeed, what you see here is London, the Sassoon Torah Ark, in their home in London. Just to remind everyone that normally Torah arks are not in private residences, but they are in synagogues. So this is already exceptional. Now, we've looked at the first object that you see when you enter the gallery. And I said it's also the single most important one. And as I try to visualize in my mind's eye the gallery, one thing that I knew I would have loved was to have the Torah shield in the center and to have different pairs of Torah finials, which we'll look in a moment, orbit the Torah shield. So this is the brilliant first design plan by our head of design, Keith Crippen, that I was really, I had the joy and honor to work with on this project. And here are the different pairs of Torah finials that I am now showing to you. But first, what are Torah finials? Torah finials are those silver ornaments that decorate the top of the Torah scroll. And their characteristic is that they have bells, so that when the Torah scroll moves with all its dressing around the synagogue, the congregation hears the tinkling of the bells, and they're called to attention as the Torah scroll passes through. And so here are the 4 pairs of Torah finials you'll find in the gallery. We acquired the first pair, this one from Morocco, in 2018, and then we got excited about it, and we continue to acquire 5 more pairs. 2 are in other galleries, and these 3 others are in the Judaica gallery. So why Torah finials are so great to demonstrate the diversity of Jewish cultures, which is one of the key messages of this gallery, because they really speak with the accent of the region that they're from, right? This is the German Baroque style, and this is the English Rococo from the 18th century, and this is the style of Islamic architecture, and this is the Farsi accent of Persian 19th century Torah finials. These are my favorite. They're bold and they're sculptural. They were made in Hamburg in 1688 by Jürgen Richels, who was a very well-established and prolific silversmith at the time. whose works you can find in the best collections in the world, the V&A in London and the Metropolitan in New York. And what he did is that he took a very popular model for Torah finials at the time, which was the Dutch hexagonal tower form on 3 tiers, but he made it much more exciting, more three-dimensional. He enlivened the surface with so many different features, like, I hope you can see, shells and trefoils and acanthus leaves. And so this pair, yes, looks and follows the model of the Dutch ones, but it's much bolder and sculptural. And important to say, again, Jürgen Richels was a Christian, and he made Judaica. And this was not the exception, it was the rule, because what I just said earlier about Jews in Europe, that they were not allowed to practice the profession of silversmiths. And just to brag a little bit with you, if you allow me, the Antiques Fine Art magazine in 2019 showed the Torah finials as one of the top museum acquisitions of the year. And look how different these are. They serve the same function in the same Jewish space, in the same ritual, but they couldn't be any more different. First of all, they're diminutive, they're very small. They're Moroccan. They were made by Jewish silversmiths in the cities, probably of Fez or Meknès, where there were important silversmithing production. And they really show the features of Islamic architecture, both in North Africa, but also before, in pre-expulsion Spain. And it can be seen that style in pre-expulsion Spain in a synagogue that was made in Toledo in the 1350s. Then, of course, it became a church, and today it's a museum. And you see the same arches, the same very dense decoration, bright colors, the horseshoe arches. It's a beautiful way to really see the merging of local visual culture with Jewish ritual. And we come to the Persian Iranian pair, 19th century, donated to us very generously 2023. So yes, last year. No, we're 2025. And you can see here, I love this pair because I don't remember if I said that the Hebrew word for Torah finials is actually rimonim, which means pomegranate. And unlike the European ones that are usually shaped like a tower, these ones are fruit-like. They have a spherical shape and a very typical floral design that is repeated both on the body and on the staves, with an inscription that is recurrent in Middle Eastern Judaica, in Torah cases and in Torah finials. Now, when they're not in a museum, all these Torah finials are normally kept inside the Torah Ark. And here is our Torah Ark, the only Torah Ark we own. Was a recent acquisition, also in 2023, before the opening of the gallery. It was made for the synagogue of Sharet Zion in Chelsea, here in Boston, and we'll see why this is so important. And it was donated by Rabbi David Wyman. And the Boston Globe was intrigued to hear about this unusual acquisition, and they featured a piece about its story. And what is the story? First of all, before I tell you the story, I want to show you the iconography, the imagery that you can see, that it's typical of American Torah arks, which in turn derive from Eastern European Torah arks. So usually you have on top the crown that we've seen symbolizes the Torah, the 10 commandments held by two rampant lions, interpreted it as the lions of the tribe of Judah. But we know that in non-Jewish European coat of arms, lions featured prominently. So it was both a European thing and a Jewish one. Then, of course, the Stars of David and the hands of the blessing gesture of the high priest. The ark that you've just seen was made by the wood carver Sam Katz that you see on the left. And he was born in Vishnivets, a small village in Galicia, in that region of the same region of the Torah Shield. And like other Eastern European Jewish immigrants, he was a woodworker, and he arrived to the US, and after a brief period in upstate New York, he settles in Chelsea, and that's when he really proceeds to become the leading Torah ark maker in the greater Boston area and beyond, because we have also Torah arks outside of, even outside in Connecticut, outside of Massachusetts. And you see him here standing behind another Torah ark that no longer exists because the synagogue in the South End was demolished. And it is serendipitous that we actually own this lion, this gilded lion. Since 1960, it's been in our collection. It was donated as an example of American folk art, certainly not as a Jewish object, and it is displayed in the gallery next to the ark. And so, as I said, Sam Katz arrives in Chelsea and he begins to be really very productive. We think that in the 20s, he made over 20 arks in the area, as I said, in and around Boston. And we still have about 10 that survive, not all in situ. I give you just a few examples. Some, as this one in Chestnut Street in Chelsea, are actually now part of a church. And so you see that the tablets of the law have actually been removed. However, there are also some arks by some Katz that are still function as Torah arks in the synagogues of Walnut Street in Chelsea and in Adam Street in Newton. And this is to show you how our ark originally looked, right? It had two other sides that we don't know what really happened to them. We have the central section, and this is the building from the outside. Today it's residential. This is a photo I took about a year ago. So to tell you the story that the Boston Globe was interested in, and forgive me, I'll just drink a sip. Okay, so how did we get to acquire the Torah Ark? Because it came to us in the form of an email early in 2020, just a few weeks before lockdown, by Rabbi David Wyman that you see here in a little thumbnail. Basically, the rabbi told us that when he was a Rabbi Newton in 1999, he heard that the synagogue of Sharet Zion in Chelsea was closing, and they had to discard the furniture. And so with a group of helpers, he went to Chelsea, and you can see him here. He's the one on the ladder actually disassembling the Torah Ark. And he sent me the VHS tape of that day of the actual the installation of the Torah Ark from the wall. And it just made a perfect beginning to this documentary, 5 minutes documentary that we've created called Rescuing the Orange Street Torah Ark a story of Jewish Chelsea that you can find on our website, but also on a monitor on a screen in the gallery. And it does two things, this documentary. It tells you the actual story of the Ark and how he was rescued by Rabbi David Wyman. But it also tells the story of what was then the hub of Jewish immigration, especially from Eastern Europe, between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. And so especially because of the origin of this Ark, that came from Chelsea, that is really Boston, we felt very strongly that we, the MFA, were the right home for it. And so we proceeded to start the acquisition process, which was not easy because of COVID. And so it took us about 2 years to go with Christine Storti, head of furniture conservation, who played a key role in this acquisition. We went together to Long Island, because you may be wondering, why Long Island? Because in the meantime, the rabbi had moved first to Texas for a few years, and decades, and then to Long Island. And so when we went in June 2022, the Torah Ark, just as you can see, it was just part of it stood in a corridor. It was not used. And then other bits of it were in boxes in Rabbi Wyman's storage unit. And so it's clear that it really needed attention and love and care and conservation treatment. And after a treatment that lasted many months, led by Christine Storti, but with the help of specialists in gilding and wood strengthening, then after a rather complex installation, we were able to install it in the gallery and really became the focus of this space. Okay, I'll get back to this if we have time. I now want to speak to you about this cylindrical silver object that you see here that belongs to a very different culture. This is a tik, which is a Torah case. Forgive me just 1 second. Which is an Iraqi tik. Tik is the Hebrew word for Torah case, and it's a large wooden Torah case embossed richly embossed in silver with this floral design encased in these leafy frames. And it is a very fine example of this type of object that was made in Baghdad. And what is important to understand is that it contained the Torah scroll. It not only contained it, but it was also read. The scroll was read in the actual Torah case without taking it out. So read standing. And this is the way that communities from Iraq and Iran and India and other areas of Asia and some areas in North Africa still house, protect, and read the Torah scroll. Now, thanks to the work of Katrina Posner in conservation, she worked on this object, I know, 100 hours to painstakingly clean the surface that was very tarnished, as you can see in this detail. You can see the before and after. And what is also beautiful about this ark, aside from the aesthetic qualities that you can appreciate, is the stories and the very moving inscription inside it. So here is the inscription. These are the two sides, right? So it's on two sides. And I'm going to read it, part of it. The stick and the Torah scroll within were dedicated by the wise and famous Signor Aaron Shalom Gabbai. Then there's a blessing for the exaltation and rest of the soul of the unfortunate young man Sasson, his son, who passed away the month of Tevet in 1879. So there's something poignant about this object. A man loses his son prematurely, and decides to donate this object with a dedicatory inscription in honor and in memory of his son. Now, who is this famous, the inscription says, Aaron Shalom Gabbai? We had to answer this question not just because of our interest, but because for every object that we acquire, we have to demonstrate the provenance, that is the history of ownership of the piece. And so as we hunt for this Aram Shalom Gabbai, we found that he was, yes, Iraq, yes, from Baghdad, but he actually was an eminent member of the Baghdadi community in Calcutta, in India. And so this means, and his synagogue was the Bet El synagogue. So this means that this object was made in Baghdad for use in Calcutta. It makes it even more appealing for us because we're so committed to telling global stories, and it does this. And it also has this very moving story of family and of love and loss. So it was a no-brainer that we wanted to acquire it, and we did in 2023. Now, so far, we've looked at Judaica made for the synagogue, but we know that Jewish education really starts in the home. And that is why we have filled this wall with ritual items made for use for domestic use. We called it Judaica Revolution because it consists almost entirely of contemporary objects. And this is very important because sometimes people tend to believe that Judaica is just something of the past, but we have to say no, it is being made and revived and transformed in exciting ways by modern artists, contemporary artists, both men and women. Now, Ludwig Wolpert, the artist of the candlesticks on the left, is considered to be the father of modernist Judaica. He was a German designer, Jewish, flees Germany, goes to Jerusalem, starts to teach at the Bezalel School, and then he's called by the New York Jewish Museum to lead and run and found, to start with, their Judaica workshop. And for 25 years he does that, and he creates objects that really revolutionize the language, the idiom of Judaica, such as this striking pair of candlesticks that rise high like a New York skyscraper, and where the inscription is no longer engraved, it's no longer decorative, or it's actually becomes the chief primary component of the design. And it is so elongated and stylized and stretched out, the letters, that it's actually takes a moment to read the inscription, Shush Ashish Be'adonai Tagel Nafshi Beloai. It comes from the book of Isaiah. I'll rejoice with my Lord, my soul will rejoice with my God. And this is in reference to the joy with the beginning of Shabbat. And what's beautiful is that we were able recently, in 2019, to acquire directly from one of his students, who's now 92 years old, Moshe Tzabari. He lives in Jerusalem. And we were able to acquire a work by his student. And he's today the foremost, greatest living master of Judaica. And when I went to visit him in his home in Jerusalem, he told me that this is a piece that he had never wanted to part from. First of all, I should say it's a Kiddush cup. It's a cup made for the wine blessing of Friday night. And he never wanted to part from it because he said that it was technically the most challenging piece he had ever made. And look at how asymmetrical and even crooked and wonky it is. And I can only show you a side, but every side you look has an entirely different shape and is engraved with different symbols of Jewish festivals. And here you see the matzah bread, the unleavened bread for Passover. Here you see the shofar, the ram's horn. And so we were thrilled to be able to acquire this directly from Moshe Tzabari a few years ago. But let's get to the women who are the protagonists of our Judaica Revolution really section. And we starting with this beloved, every time we share it on social media, we get a lot of compliments, at Garden of Lights, Hanukkah lamp made by Linda Threadgill, who's based in Santa Fe. She's trained generation of metalsmiths and artists, and she's strongly inspired by nature and botany. And here, if you look, she's basically created for every candle holder a differently, well, you cannot see it, but a differently etched flowers and leaves that climb these very thin stems. And flanking these Hanukkah lamp are two inventive and different renditions of the spice container for the ritual of the Havdalah at the end of the Shabbat on Saturday evenings. So spices are contained in these boxes, spice boxes or containers, and during the ritual they are smelled to retain some of the sweetness, smell some of the sweetness of the Shabbat before we're plunged in our routine of the rest of the week. And these are two really innovative artists, very different. One is Changi Chu, Korean born, and you see how she etched the Hebrew words for spices, samim, on this very fluid form. And she's known for really trying to experiment with different techniques to create organic fluid forms. On the left, highly sophisticated and refined, Deborah Krupenia is actually a local artist and known to work with Japanese alloys. And here she's created this flattened oval shape that gives it almost an outer space quality with the tiny perforations, gilded perforations that are meant to emanate the scent. And all these objects are on display in the Judaica Revolution section. I think I have to speed up. Okay. So in the gallery, I had for the first time the opportunity to juxtapose an historic object with a highly contemporary one. Actually with its contemporary response. And so if you look on the right, we have an Elijah's cup. It was made in what was then not Italy yet, in Piemonte, northwest Italy in 1830 by a Jewish silversmith, Italian Jewish silversmith, Israele Vitale. And we know that it is Elijah's cup, and I should say the Elijah's cup is a custom for the evening of Passover, where the fifth cup of wine is poured for the prophet Elijah, who's meant to arrive as an unknown guest and announce the arrival of the Messiah. And so this is not a practical cup that actually people drink from. And that's why you see it's usually very, very large. It's a goblet with rich ornamentation, these wiry flowers on top. And this is typical of Piemontese Kiddush cups from this period. Like the Torah shield that I told you earlier, this is an exception that it was made by a Jewish silversmith who even included Jewish symbols on the foot. Again, the hands of the high priest in blessing gesture that you've seen earlier. And the sad paradox is that it was made by a Jewish silversmith because there was a special dispensation in the Kingdom of Savoy and Sardinia at that time for Jews to practice the profession. The sad part is that then, fast forward about 100 years, in 1939, October, a year after fascist Italy passed the racial laws, the family who then owns it leaves Italy and comes to the US, and this is how this cup arrived in the US. And this is to remind you that we always have to trace and demonstrate what the history of ownership is. And this is the feminist response by Cynthia Hyde, a wonderful local designer and sculptor and metalsmith. So it couldn't be, again, more different. Very, very smooth surface with zero ornamentation, with a shape that different people interpret in a different way. It could be an orchid, but what is it? It's a Miriam's cup. So because Jewish tradition had the tradition of Elijah, in the late 1980s, American Jewish women feel that it's time to honor a woman from the Jewish Bible and history. They choose Miriam because of her connection to water and create this new ritual item called the Miriam's cup to be placed on the table during Passover. And because of Miriam's connection with water in the book of Exodus. And there is more feminist Judaica to come. I want to show you that one of the three paintings that we have in the gallery is this quirky, fun, beloved by children painting called Passover Seder, painted in the 1980s by Malka Zeldis, a New York artist who's now in her 80s. And she's self-taught, and so it was so important to us to include her work, both because it's a Jewish work by a woman, a so-called folk art or self-taught artist, and because also it illustrates, it shows those rituals that we talk about in the gallery. And so the Elijah tradition of Passover, she shows us the the door waiting for Elijah to arrive, for the chair waiting for him, and the cup, the Elijah's cup. And then it shows, those rampant lions, the lions we've seen before on the Torah arcs, the symbolic food, the Manischewitz wine that many of you will be familiar with. And this is a different work in the gallery that actually attracts a lot of attention. You may notice that I'm speeding up because I've noticed that we have 10 minutes to go. So we're coming to the last section, dressing the body, that gives us an opportunity to showcase our textiles, the textiles in the collection. And I want to show you the juxtaposition of these two paintings by the same marvelous portraitist, Jewish artist, Isidor Kaufmann, who painted in Vienna in the second half of the 19th century. The very defiant looking Hannah is in our gallery, in our collection. This incredible painting is actually in the part of the Jewish Museum collection. But why am I showing it to you? Because it encapsulates the difference between the function of textiles in Orthodox Judaism. I'm not talking about more modern and progressive denominations, between textiles for men that are really about devotion and prayer and the commandments, and textiles for women that are usually about modesty and covering oneself and covering especially the hair. And here you've seen that he's wearing a prayer shawl at Talit, worn during morning prayers and during Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And in the gallery, you can find these gorgeous, also newly acquired prayer shawl made in Amsterdam, we believe, in the 18th or 19th century. With a very typical feature of Spanish and Portuguese family living in Amsterdam, where the corners of the prayer shawl, from which the knotted fringes emerged, that are really the more important part of the object. They are the commandment. They use this beautiful silk brocade with gold and silver thread. And you can also find this other exquisite textile. It is actually a talit katan, Hebrew for small talit. It was, we believe, made because of its style in Italy in the 18th century. This was a recent rediscovery in the storage of our textiles department, and very exciting rediscovery. It was part of a gift of hundreds of textiles donated by Philip Lehman of the Lehman Brothers Bank in honor, in memory of his wife in 1938. And this is the first time that we have the opportunity to show it. And notice how it keeps the knotted fringes, but it is, the talit katan is usually used underneath clothes. Whereas in this case, we believe, because of the luxury of the silk fabric and the gilded embroidery, it was almost certainly worn to be seen in synagogues, probably for a bar mitzvah by a boy. And I want to come to show you the juxtaposition that talks about the consistency of the use of head coverings across the Jewish world in Eastern Europe and in Yemen, but with a totally different style. The Sterntichel of Eastern Europe, with this fake satin wig to mimic the hair interlaced pearls, a clasp, a diamond clasp, and totally different in Yemen, made for Jewish women, often for weddings in the capital of Sana'a. And here it is, also featured on the cover of the late Israeli Yemenite singer Ofra Haza, Yemenite songs, and worn by one of my oldest friends the day of her wedding. She's of Yemenite origin. And you can see it's very festive, uses a silk Indian brocade hung with coins and with very intricate filigree pieces of jewelry made by Jewish Yemenite silversmiths. You can find both in the gallery and on our website our playlist, Spotify playlist, with 9 tracks that really are meant to, designed to invoke the music of all these different Jewish cultures, Moroccan and Iraqi and Italian and Yemenite and Persian and so on. Moving quickly to another feminist Judaica maker, Tamar Paley. She did an exhibition in 2018 at Brandeis University that was really her graduation project, though she studied at a college, art college in Tel Aviv, an exhibition called Fringes, A Fringe of Her Own. And the title already makes us understand that what she's seeking to do is to create feminist versions of important ritual garments for men, such as the tefillin, the phylacteries that are worn in the morning during prayers, both on the arms and on the forehead, and that contain biblical verses from the book of Numbers. She does the same. This is a piece of jewelry, but it's also liturgical object with the silver shaped as a shin, the Hebrew letter, the initial to one of the names of God, Shaddai, and it is attached with a scroll inscribed with the same verse. And of course, it's an important gesture by these artists to make feminist work. Okay, so I come to the last objects that I'm talking to you about, and I'm sorry, a bit late. And it's something very different, right? But I wanted to end with this because of its acquisition story that I hope will inspire you. So this painting, which represents an elderly Jew absorbed in the study of the Talmud, that was donated by members of the Jewish community to the MFA in 1926, is the first time that is on display. And it was painted by Jacob Binder, who was a Russian portraitist, a good painter, and he was also an associate of John Singer Sargent. Before I tell you the story, notice the realism of details such as the protruding vein in the hands and the sunken cheeks, and even the beautiful game of light and shade on the collar, on the atarat, the collar of the talit, of the prayer shawl. There's a story here. There's a Boston story. So if you haven't been, go to the last floor of the Boston Public Library. You can walk up, no one will stop you, to look at a mural cycle by none other than John Singer Sargent called The Triumph of Religion. I'm sure most of you know it. In The Triumph of Religion, and there's a connection here to our painting, there is an offensive depiction of Judaism, of synagogue. Synagogue was a medieval anti-Jewish personification that was frequently found in medieval manuscripts and cathedrals and sculpture. Synagogue represents Judaism, defeated, humiliated, half naked with the broken scepter, the crown is tipping over and is falling. And the most important thing is that synagogue is blindfolded because she's blind to the truth of Christ. When John Singer Sargent finished this cycle and Bostonians saw it in 1919, the Jewish community here was really hurt and offended and found it very offensive. And there was an uproar and there was a call to remove this painting. The painting was not removed, which I think is a positive because we can learn and tell the story. And it led to this acquisition because as throughout the following years, there was this commotion and in the Boston Jewish community, the editor of the Jewish Advocate that no longer exists launched a public campaign calling for the purchase. Sorry, I have to move. On the pages of his paper, he said, Binder's artistic creation, the Talmud, is to be presented to the Museum of Fine Arts to public subscription. What is more important is what he wrote in another issue of his paper, where he said that he wanted to donate the painting to the great reservoir, which is the pride of the city of Boston, i.e. the MFA, to represent the most typical presentation that a dignified, self-respecting artistic jury could make. There is material that suggests and demonstrates that this acquisition was really triggered by the offense caused by the Sargent's fresco. And so the Jewish community felt that it was important to give a dignified representation of Jews in the museum. And this is the only object that I know of in the museum that was donated by the Jewish community, members of the Jewish community. We displayed for the first time. And I'll conclude here by saying that I hope that it will serve to you as an inspiration, perhaps to support us to build a strong and proud Jewish art collection, because at least until a Jewish museum is open in this city, we are the address. Thank you so much for listening to this long talk.
Thank you so much, Simona. I know we gave you a real challenge to walk us through that beautiful gallery in an hour, and thank you. You got it. You did it. If we can indulge you for a few more minutes, I think we can take a handful of questions. If that's all right. And I will remind everybody at home to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask questions. And we will see how many we can get to. But I do have one already that came in while you were speaking. And it is a question about the collection itself. How long did it take to put the collection together, and is it in fact a permanent collection now at the MFA?
Yes, the collection that we've been building is a permanent collection that we show in different galleries and also in the Judaica gallery. What I like to call the first deliberate Judaica acquisition, meaning the museum saying we want to buy a piece of Judaica happened in 2009. Then in 2013, that's the real watershed moment where a gift of 120 objects from the Charles and Lynn Schusterman collection come to us. And then, which are all domestic Judaica, so made to be used in the home, although quite diverse. And then, but most of what you see in the gallery is new acquisitions made in the past 7 years.
Great. Another question coming in. Are there any wooden synagogues left in Europe?
No, it's a good question,
Yeah.
and I should know the answer because they were all, I think they were almost all destroyed. I don't know. I will have to check. I don't know if there is one wooden. We're talking about wooden, which is a good question because it was a characteristic of Poland and, what is now, especially of what I said is Eastern Poland, Western Ukraine, these very simple looking from outside wooden structures. And inside they were immensely colorful and lively decorations. I don't know if there is one still standing that is made of wood.
Mm. Um, a question I think about the very last portion of what you were talking about. Do you know why the I'm going to stumble over the word, Talmudist is only being displayed now?
I can't speak for previous. I don't know why it was not shown before.
Mm,
Actually, I should. It's good that this question. When I looked in the object file, I saw that it was in 1951 loaned to an exhibition to Boston University. So it was actually, I correct myself, it was actually shown in 1951 outside the museum. I cannot speak for decisions or non-decisions. The collection is so enormous that sometimes it's not a deliberate decision not to show something. So this is no criticism of what happened before. It's just that it's about time. It was about time that we showed it.
excellent. And just a couple questions here in the Q&A to sort of clarify. The collection, of course, is a permanent collection. And is the gallery also permanent? It will always have a permanent
That's our
home,
intention.
right?
That's our intention. That's our
Excellent.
plan. And so we hope that it will stay permanent.
Excellent. Another question about the collection, is there a plan to create a publication that covers the Judaica collection? And
Thank
I feel
you.
like it's something I should know and I don't.
Thank you for the question, because I'd love to do that. There's been a lot of interest and demand. This question comes up a lot. It would be
Mm,
great to do a book, like many other parts of the collection have. So I hope that we will be able to offer that to our visitors as well. We don't have a book yet.
currently. Okay. Um, we'll take a couple more questions. Are there acquisitions that you are currently considering? Or is there perhaps an acquisition you would love to have?
Okay, let's start with the ones that I'm currently considering. I'm currently working on a small, tiny, this small, but so meaningful and moving Iraqi amulet, gold amulet that stayed in the same family, and the lady who wants to donate it, it belonged, the lady is now in her 80s, it belonged to her grandmother from Iraq. And these little objects were meant usually to protect babies and their mothers. So I'm working on that.
Mm.
And when you said something that you would love, there is certainly the thing that we don't have that I would love to have is a Hebrew illuminated manuscript. So late medieval or Renaissance illuminated manuscript. But those ones are A, very rare, and B, extremely expensive.
Ah, yes. Um, a question about why, or I'll just read the question. Why don't you have a Torah scroll? Is that something that is in the collection that is not on display, or is it not part of?
So yeah, we don't have it, and usually in the only place where I've seen a Torah scroll on display, it's in the Judaica section of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And usually, if you show it in a museum, it's because it's flawed. Otherwise, you're not
Mm.
allowed to. It's for sacred use in a synagogue. I haven't thought about actually showing a Torah scroll. Maybe that's a step a bit too far for me. I feel like it really should stay in the sacred space in a synagogue,
Mm,
but never say never.
great. And perhaps one last question. Are there objects currently in the collection that are not on display, but that you plan to display in the future?
Yes, there are many. There are many such objects. Yes, many. Okay, I'll give you maybe one example, of which we have two
Sure.
examples. The paper cuts, Jewish paper cuts that are incredibly intricate and lively and colorful. It's an art form that developed in that same very, very rich Jewish culture of Galicia that I told you about.
Hmm.
And they often show the same iconography of animals interlaced with plants that you see on, unfortunately, no longer on Torah arcs in Eastern Europe. And on the Torah shield I showed you, we have two examples of paper cuts, one made in
Mm,
America in the 1920s, and one made probably in what is now Ukraine in the late 19th century. And I'm hoping to be able to show those.
that would be fascinating. Yeah. Um, well, there's one more question that we get often in virtual lectures that I like to ask when it comes up because it shows a real interest among the attendees in learning more. So is there a book on Judaica that you would recommend for somebody who wants to dig a little deeper into the subject? Is there somewhere you would direct them?
Yeah, yes. Well, actually, there is as an introductory book to understand different styles and forms, and also how to be able to possibly recognize authentic objects versus forgeries. There is a book called A Collector's Guide to Judaica by Jay
Mm,
Weinstein. And that's a good first book, quite comprehensive about the different types of objects.
that's great. Well, many comments in the chat here about the wonderful lecture and thanking you for such a beautiful collection and for coming and speaking tonight. I will reiterate all of those comments. Thank you so much. And to everyone who is joining us from home tonight, if you have not had an opportunity to see Intentional Beauty here at the MFA, I really encourage you to plan your next visit to the museum to see it. It is in a gallery that is included as an MFA member with your daily admission benefits. So definitely plan a visit to see this really stunning collection. And Simona, thank you so much again for joining us tonight and for the extra time to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you everyone for staying with us. I hope that you got a little more than a little taste and come soon to see us.
Oh, thank you again. And good night to everybody.
Thank you.